Welcome back to News Talk and our conversation this Thursday with D.C. Council Chairman Phil Mendelson. We're going to go to the phones in just a moment. Caroline, sit tight. Your call will be first. And if others would like to talk directly with D.C. Council Chairman Mendelson, grab an open line at our number, 703-387-1020. As I indicate, Caroline, stay on the line. We'll be talking with you live on the air in just a couple of seconds. Mr. Chairman, can you give us your thoughts about the deal that the city has signed with the Wizards and the Mystics for a facility in Southeast? How much are taxpayers putting into this deal, and do you think the return will be worth the investment?
I like the proposal generally, and the amount that the city is putting in I understand to be around $56 million. I'm concerned whether, in fact, the council is going to have a chance to look at the details of this proposal. My staff has advised me that that might not occur. I talked to the mayor yesterday, and she assured me that the lease with the Monumental Sports would be coming to the council, so there would be an opportunity. I do think that the public should be able to look at the details through the council and our process before any ink is signed on paper that commits us. I like the proposal because it will bring some activity to Ward 8 and more particularly to the St. Elizabeth's East Campus, and we've been talking about trying to develop the East Campus. This will bring a lot of activity. I mean, we're talking about the Mystics, we're talking about the Wizards will be acquiring a new, like a minor league team. We'll see that there. We'll see other events as well. So many, many nights there will be some activity there.
Do you think the analysis, if you get to see it, will have some of the nitty-gritty?
It should.
Yeah.
It absolutely should. That's the whole point. One thing that I am concerned about, and this gets beyond the concept, talking about the details, is that initially we were talking about a slightly smaller stadium than what appears to now be on the table, and that larger stadium may not be necessary, and therefore may add cost. Also, that the city would be running the stadium, and so I think we should be looking at these things. I'm not interested in paying more money than we need to. I'm interested in having a Wizards practice facility at the St. Elizabeth.
It makes a lot of people nervous when the cost is socialized and the profit is privatized. You know,
yes.
why don't the billionaire owners pay for their own stadiums? That's not so much a comment directed here, but it's a general view that many have.
Yes, but if it's a stadium around 3,500, 4,000 seats, and we're able to program it, the Wizards are there, of course, and the Mystics, but we're able to program it, it's our facility.
To the phones, line 2 first. Hello, Caroline in Northeast. You're on the air. You're on with the chairman. Welcome, and go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. Hello, Chairman Mendelson.
Good morning.
To see you. I'd like you to comment on the deployment of police body cameras. As you know, there's a tug-of-war that's going on between the deployment and the privacy issues that deployment raises. And I'm wondering if you believe, is there a sensible way of reconciling these two potentially competing issues? Thank you, and I'll take your answer on the air.
Okay, well, it's a good question. I think there's a little bit in the discussion or the debate over what should happen with the tapes, whether they should be available, that there's some misunderstanding in terms of what we're accomplishing with these cameras. The mere existence of these cameras, that is having police officers wear cameras, will provide accountability with regard to disputes or allegations over police conduct or a suspect's conduct. And that's very important. That accountability exists whether those tapes, the film, is available to the public or not, because it would exist and be available if there's a dispute. So the debate is on a tangential issue, if you will, and I don't mean to minimize it, but that issue is whether this is like any other government document, FOIA is Freedom of Information Act. That is that you could get the film footage when the police officer comes into my home on just a routine whatever. And now I realize that what the mayor's proposed would actually kind of limit the FOIA-ability. This is all getting worked out, but that has nothing to do with accountability. That has to do with how public we want this information to be.
Line 3, Rodney in Northwest. Your turn. Thanks for calling. Hi.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning, Council Member Mendelson and Bruce. I'd like to say thank you for taking my call.
Sure thing. Thank you.
The question that I have is, in consideration of what's happening in the city in terms of finances, why are we privatizing the ambulatory services? Studies have shown variously all over across the United States that privatization is actually going to cost the city more money down the line. You're talking about 5 to 10 years down the line. Also, let's deal with the management issue with the fire department. You had several lawsuits in regards to Mr. Mills and his family, who died right across the street from a fire station from somebody that had previous complaints. So I mean, why are we so busy to give people, private companies, money and no services for the residents?
Well, let me answer that. First of all, I largely agree with your comments with regard to privatization. I think oftentimes privatization sounds like a good idea, a better idea than the reality, and that there have been studies that show that oftentimes the cost is greater or the quality of the service is worse when we outsource. That is, we take a government function and we instead contract it out. I understand what you're saying about management issues, but we have a new fire and EMS chief, and the new fire and EMS chief is well regarded. He seems to have impressed the unions, and so I'm not going to lay the current problem at his feet. The issue here is that we have an immediate need to increase capacity, and that's why I and others have said that the proposal is worth supporting in the short term. And I want to emphasize short term.
And our understanding is that the calls with the most intense need for sophisticated trained.
The advanced life support would continue to be transported by the fire and EMS department.
And it'll sort of be a triage where the perceived lesser need, more routine calls for service are the ones that will be handled by the contract ambulances.
Yes, so fire and EMS will come to the scene, they will assess the patient, they will begin treatment. If it's advanced life support, they will transport to the hospital. If it's basic life support, then a decision will be made whether to bring in a private ambulance and therefore increase the capacity for our system.
With everything that was going on with the Pope last week, we didn't have a chance to dive into the ruling on the city's gun laws.
Yeah.
That was depending on how you read it, it was a partial defeat, but a partial upholding, and maybe a significant upholding of the bulk of what the city has on the books as it relates to the Second Amendment.
You know, there's a lot of rhetoric around Second Amendment jurisprudence, and it's unfortunate because the rhetoric is oftentimes misleading. There are folks who just hate any gun regulation, and so anytime there is any provision that's struck down, this is a major victory. The reality is that a number of these organizations, like the National Rifle Association, oppose registration, and what the court did last week was uphold our registration law. And they upheld a number of components of our registration law. For instance, that an applicant has to appear in person with a gun. Now the court struck down a few provisions like that the applicant has to appear in person with the firearm, saying, no, you don't have to bring the firearm, but the applicant has to show up. The court upheld that there has to be an identification check, including fingerprinting. So there were a lot of things that some of these Second Amendment folks just hate. And unfortunately for them, the court upheld our law. Now, they did strike down a few things, like the limitation on how many firearms could be registered in 1 month. So you are a gun owner, a gun enthusiast, you have a number of firearms. Our law right now limits how many you could register in a month. The court said that that limitation was unconstitutional.
D.C. Council Chairman Phil Mendelson joins us every month at this time.
Sure.
Thank you for your time. We'll see you next month.
Look forward to it.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you as always. When we return, analysis of the call for more oversight of Metro when we return, and joining us will be Robert McCartney of the Washington Post.